Hello to everyone out there on all the streaming platforms, LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube. Thanks for joining us today on the Future of Data Meetup. I'm Navita Sood. I'm Director of Product Marketing here at Cloudera, and I'll be your host today. I'm excited to have David join me today. David is my colleague at Cloudera and my favorite go to person for everything data warehousing. Hi, David.
Hi, Navita, and thank you. Happy to be here. How's it looking out there where you are today? Where are you coming in with us today?
Yeah, I'm dialed in from San Jose, California. It's
Nice.
nice and warm today. What about you, David? How's Boston?
We're a little warmer than the last few days. It's a little bit above freezing. Got rid of some of the ice on the driveway, but it's been
Mm.
a cold January, which that's not unusual for this area of the world this time of year.
Yeah, you got to send us some of that snow and cold here too.
Oh yeah, you can go skiing on
um,
that snow. That's the good thing.
I know. So I was also thinking that to get people warmed up, why don't we ask people joining us on all the different platforms to talk about where they're dialing in from? And since we are in Jan of 2022, why don't we talk about some New Year resolutions as well? I want to apologize to people who are New Year resolution haters in advance, but yeah, I can get started. I am. My New Year resolution for 2022 is to take more days off this year. So Cloudera has been great. They give us unplugged days, which is really cool because you get to unplug and take some time off. But reflecting back on 2021, I realized that because of all COVID and everything else and these unplugged days, I didn't get to travel with my family much. So this year, yeah, I want to take some days off, apart from those unplugged days, and maybe try to travel with family. What about you, David? What are your resolutions, or are you a New Year resolution hater?
Well, so I'm very proud that I have kept the New Year's resolution I made over a decade ago, which is to never make another New Year's resolution
Oh
again.
wow.
The only one I've ever kept.
Okay, and yeah, I'm trying to see. If there's anyone else, yeah, please type in. Let us know what your New Year resolution is or where you're dialing in from. We'd like to hear, and that's another reason that'll also help you participate in our raffle. So yeah, I want to share with you all that. Today we are on this future of meetup, future of data meetup, where we'll be talking about Hue, which is I'm just the host, so I'm just going to be doing the talking. But David is going to be presenting on Hue. He's our expert and a very knowledgeable person. He's going to talk about Hue and share with us what are the latest features and capabilities that we've added this year. He'll also show us a live demo of some of those capabilities. He'll walk us through a roadmap of what is coming up in Hue this year. And yeah, I'm just excited to hear from David about that. David, why don't you just introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi. So I'm David Dickman, and I am a director here of product management at Cloudera. I'm on the data warehouse team, and my primary responsibilities these days is focusing on the folks that use data every day, folks that are visualizing that data, slicing and dicing through schema and data to come up with what I like to call the beautiful SQL query. And this community is very near and dear to my heart. In a past life, I supported a product called Power Designer, which was a data modeling tool. And so anything to do with understanding data, using data, combining different data sources together is where I get my work passion. And for something interesting about myself, in my private life, I also like to modify solid body electric guitars. All my kids are into music. My daughter's studying to be a musician. So I find that hobby is a great way for me to, as a non-musician or someone who's basically clumsy with his hands, able to do something that is still fun and exciting with them.
That sounds fun. So yeah, before we get started, let's talk about why we are here today. And I think one of the main reasons we're here today is for the prizes. Let's talk about the prizes we have for all of you all. Um, I can. We'll have two prizes today, prize one and prize two. As you can see on the screen, we have t-shirts and bottles and bags to win. The only condition is that you have to be asking questions or commenting as often as possible on the different social channels you're dialed in from. So please enter your questions or comments. We are here to answer your questions, and also that would help you be able to participate in the raffle. And there will be we'll do drawing at the end of the presentation. It's the Wheel of Fortunes style of drawing. And remember, you have to be present to win. So yeah, remember to ask questions. And let's get started. David, take it away.
Thank you, Navita. So what I'm here to talk to you folks about is what's new with Hue. So for those of you who have been with us for a while on the Cloudera side of the fence, Hue is probably a familiar tool. But for folks who've joined us from the Hortonworks side of the fence, or for folks who are new to the Cloudera Data Platform, Hue may be new to you. So first, I'd like to talk a little bit about what our strategy is for helping folks use data. We see these communities, two separate communities working with two different tool sets. We have folks that are interested in, as I was saying before, slicing and dicing through schema and data. We're the kind of folks that understand what complex queries look like and how to create what I like to call that beautiful SQL query that is used to be able to give us data sets that are meaningful and concise and will be able to be used by the business to make decisions. But there's another community that we're serving as well. And this community is able to understand the different data sets and how they combine, may not be as skilled in complex SQL query creation, but certainly understands how to not just see how the data sets combine and create meaningful data results, but how to create beautiful visuals so that everybody can instantly look and understand what that data set is communicating. Turn that data into information and that information into knowledge that lets us make decisions. So to that end, we're investing in two distinct tool sets in the Cloudera Data Platform. And the first is Hue. Hue's long history with the big data environment and Hue's long history as an SQL editor for a lot of different projects allows us to draw upon that and look forward to being able to use this in the Cloudera Data Warehouse, as well as other places in the Cloudera Data Platform, wherever SQL may be used. We'll focus on that today and how that helps SQL developers get the most out of their experience with the data platform. But we've also introduced Cloudera's data visualization toolset. This is a toolset that allows us to create rich dashboards and reports and applications that allow us to visualize data. We'll leave that for another day. But the reason why we're calling these two into question is for communities that want to create SQL, we're going to be folding the Data Analytics Studio into Hue so that we'll move forward with one tool set for the whole Cloudera Data Platform for those purposes. And then we're leveraging our acquisition of Arcadia Data to give you the Cloudera Data Visualization component, among other things. And this component is going to be used by communities to be able to create visuals, share visuals, and use visuals to make decisions. So this is Hue. Hue is a fully integrated SQL tool for the modern SQL worker. What we see on the left here is, and I'll show you this in the tool itself. We see here the ability to navigate through the data model, the tables, the columns, etc. We have here the place where we'll create the SQL statements where we have things like autocomplete, and we detect the data model and we'll offer up column names, table names, etc. as appropriate. We have syntax checking to make sure, and the syntax coloring as well, so you know when you're getting it right, to make sure that this query is being built correctly. And then we can execute these queries to see if we're getting the result sets back that we expect. On the right-hand side is some cheat sheets and other tools that help you construct the query using the dialect of the editor that you're connecting to. In this case, we're going up against Hive, so we're 99.9% compliant with the Hive SQL dialect at this point, and we're always looking to keep up with the latest and greatest that's going on there. Now, a couple of things that are nice here is in this window in the middle, this is where we're going to get all this feedback. When I run a query or do any kind of interaction with you, anything that's going to be happening behind the scenes is going to report in this window. We'll see everything from Java error messages to the statements that would be sent to a monitoring tool to be able to show you what's going on as the query executes, especially in long-running queries. This is a good way to just keep your eye on what's going on and see if it's executing the way you expect. And then below we have the result sets, but we also have every query you've run in not just this session, but previous sessions, and specific queries you've tagged and saved under saved queries. And I'll show you a little bit about how that works as well. But what we've done in Hue recently, it's focused on 3 themes: making sure we maintain feature completeness for the SQL environments and the database engines that we support in the Cloudera Data Platform. We're also looking at how we're integrating into the platform across the board. And we have other innovations as well. These are things that we see as benefits that streamline your use or provide a new superpower or capability that you need to be able to get the job done as a data worker. So for feature completeness, we're going to talk today about supporting the stored procedure and function language of Hive, HPL SQL. I'll show you how you can configure Hue to be able to create, edit, and run these procedures so you can start adding that business logic into your Hive environments. We'll also talk about the Data Analytics Studio and what features we're bringing forward into Hue. For folks who are used to having Hue, these will be new features for you. For those of you who are used to having Data Analytics Studio, this is great because now it'll give you one more reason to be able to start using Hue instead of the Data Analytics Studio moving forward. For CDP integration, we've got single sign-on, which means that once I'm signed into my CDP environment, I can launch Hue without additional sign-on. We've also got RAS integration. This is using Ranger. And what this provides is fine-grained access control on all of the data sets that you're dealing with in the environment. And we have data visualization integration, where I'm able to take the queries built in Hue and using single sign-on to DataViz, go into DataViz, create a data set based on query or based on table, and start building visuals directly from it. And for other innovations, we've added the file browsers. These have been around for a little while, but what we've done is we've integrated these with some of the other work that we're doing, such as RAS integration. And this is particularly interesting around things like the S3, AWS S3 store. With RAS integration, I can give fine-grained access control over browsing of the S3 store, which gives our users and our administrators the ability to be more free with information because they'll be sure that only the right users have access to the right information at the right time. And we also have a direct file import. What this does is it allows us to bring in experimental data sets directly into our virtual warehouse, where we can slice and dice through schema and data to either answer burning business questions quickly or do some exploratory to find out what data correlations matter so I can invest in proper data preparation, proper data optimization, and proper visuals for next generation dashboards and reports that make us smarter about our business. So when it comes to the DAS and Hue topic, we'll show some of the things we brought in. And the big thing we brought in is this job browser, Query Explorer, and some troubleshooting capabilities. So now we can visualize how our Hive queries are running. We can get into the details of the various Hive and TES jobs, and we'll have a clear understanding of what's going on in our environment, as well as the ability to stop any renegade jobs and queries and be able to understand what went wrong. So let's take a look at all of this in here. So the first thing I want to talk about is HPL SQL. This is a stored procedure language that is part of Hive and part of the Cloudera Data Warehouse implementation of Hive. And the first thing we want to do is we want to properly configure Hue to be able to understand HPL SQL syntax, which is different from the traditional syntax used for data description language and data manipulation language in a Hive database. So let me give you an example of that. So here's a simple stored procedure. We have the create procedure declaration. I'm going to call this greet. It's going to take a parameter of string type called name. And then it's going to provide a little function. It's going to simply print hello and whatever name was passed. Now, the thing I want to highlight here is these delimiters. If you remember when we use Hue, whenever we hit a semicolon, we assume that is the complete block because semicolon is the delimiter between select statements or create table statements or create view statements, whatever it is that you're using in Hive. But when it comes to the procedure, this is actually a line delimiter. We'd have multiple types of lines and multiple blocks of code all combined to make a single procedure. So when we convert to HPL SQL mode, we recognize the semicolon as not a statement or not a block delimiter, but as a statement delimiter. And we switch to this backslash that will be used, or forward slash, the forward slash will be used as the statement, the whole block delimiter. So here, if you see when I highlight, everything is highlighted up until the slash. And a second statement here, greet David, is also delimited by a slash. So first thing I want to show you is today, how do you get to be able to put your Hue into HPL SQL editing mode? So the first thing we would do, and let me just pop over to the data warehouse itself. So this is our data warehouse administrative view. And this is the virtual warehouse that I'm doing my stored procedure development in. And if I go into the edit of this virtual warehouse, under configurations for Hue, if I look at the Hue safety valve parameter, I have added this beeswax function. This parameter tells the connection when connecting Hue to Hive to use the HPL SQL editor connection or a processor connection instead of the traditional processor connection. Now, one of the things that we're looking at moving forward is to make this even more streamlined within the user experience. But you can get up and running today, creating and managing your stored procedures by simply creating this connection. And the way that I use it, because you put this here in the virtual warehouse declaration, which means every instance of Hue running off this virtual warehouse will be configured for HPL SQL editing, I simply created two different virtual warehouses. This very small one that is going to be used by my development community to do the procedures. And then I have a second virtual warehouse that can be any size I want. That's where I do my traditional slicing and dicing through schema and data, running all my dashboards and reports. Moving forward, we can have one virtual warehouse, and then when I connect with Hue, we can decide which view we want. All right, so let's actually try and create this procedure. There we go, success. This procedure is now created. So let's go ahead and run this procedure. There we go. Hello, David. Everything's working great. So now we can get into more complex procedures and have the business logic stored together with our Hive data, giving us other options for being able to process, understand, and manipulate that data. So next, let's take a look at other things that we've done in Hue. One of my favorite new capabilities in Hue is the ability to import data directly from my desktop. Today, we're supporting CSV files, and in Tech Preview, we have the ability to import from Excel. So let me show you what that looks like. I go to the importer here, and I'm going to import from small local file. There is a file size limit. Right now, it's about 200K. We're going to get larger file sizes in the next release. And we simply go to choose a file. So I'm looking on my desktop for a file that contains data that I want to include in my analytics. In this particular example, I'm looking at the airline sample data, and I'm thinking, wouldn't it be nice if I understood which passengers were on international flights, and if some of those international flights had any delays related to them? Well, since I just have flight data, I don't know any passengers that have, let's say, an international connection where the first leg is domestic, the second leg is international. So I need to go get some ticket data. So I found some service out on the internet that had some passenger manifests that were redacted, so no personally identifying information, but useful for this kind of analysis. Downloaded it as a CSV, and now I'm going to bring that in using Hue. So the first thing I do once I found the file is Hue takes a look, and it looks at that first row, and it determines it has a header because that first row doesn't look like the other rows. If it's wrong, I can unclick it, and then that becomes the first row. But yes, it does have a header. It uses the data from the first row as the column headers, and that becomes the default column names in the table. If I like what I see here, I get a little bit of sample data. This looks good. I go to next, where I can provide a name. I'm going to accept the default name, but I can give this a different database schema, a different table name. And here I can change any of the column names that we auto-detected. I can even change the data types if I think what Hugh is guessing was wrong. So if I see only numbers for most of the data, I'll assume it's an integer. If I see mostly characters, I'll assume it's a string. Or if I see mixed data, I'll assume it's a string. And all of the different Hive data types are available to select from. So if we think something's an integer, but it's actually a float, you can go ahead and make that change before we do the import. Then I hit submit. And what this does now is this connects to Hive. And it starts to create this table and insert the data. So let's take a look. I think the table is still being built. It's a decent sized import, not super large, so it'll take a minute or two to complete. And there we go. Everything's loaded up. There's our table. So now if I go back to the editor, drag and drop, select from passenger data, boom, there we go. I see that I've got some data brought in. My table is good. So we can do this with any number of data sets, but what's really interesting is being able to combine this with some existing data sets, because the purpose of something like this is I've got some new data, I want to see if it makes sense, or I've got some new burning business question. I need to get this data from any system anywhere, quickly load it in. I don't have time to wait for a full data preparation, a full data ingest. I don't even care if this data is new or old. I just know that it's close enough for me to get the close enough answer I need to answer the question today. So let's go ahead and take a peek. I have here the other data that we're going to be looking at, and I'm going to look at the airline on time data. So this is the sample data that's included in Cloudera Data Warehouse. So let's say I want to now explore this data. All right, I'm going to do something really silly. You see, as I'm typing, I have autocomplete. All right, that should make a nice big mess. Now I'm going to run this query. Things start happening. I'm not getting a response back. Gee, what's going on? Well, this is where the DAS into Hue features become interesting. So I'm going to go and take a look at the jobs. Specifically, I'm going to look at queries. And there it is. There's that query chugging away. Now, since I just did basically a Cartesian product of 4 fairly decent sized tables, this is probably going to take a while to come back. And since I didn't do any where clauses or anything like that, it's a big data set for no good reason at all. I don't want to waste any more time, money, and energy on this. So let's go ahead and select that and say kill. We don't really need to be running this query anymore. Now, when I go back to the editor, I'm told, yeah, user invoked kill query. So we can go and look at what's going on in our queries. We can see what's happening. If they're in a stalled state, we can exit them out. But let's show what other things we can learn about our queries by looking at a good complex query. So we have an example here. Let's see, what have we got? Let's look at this set. So let's see. If we look at this query, so this is a query that's just going to check how many passengers have long planned layovers on international travel. And I think we are good. What did I miss? Oh, I'm selecting. Let's try that. All right, so there's our result. So we see the passenger count on these airline carriers, which passengers, and so we see some airlines have a large number of passengers that have long international layovers. That could be interesting information. Let's take a look at the queries. And here's the query I just ran. So we can see some data. Well, it started 31 seconds ago, took 23 seconds to execute. Here's the visual explain that shows us in each step what's happening in our query, how this query has been run. Here's the timeline, the DAG submission, the DAG runtime, post-execution time. This is the query configuration. This is everything that was configured when I ran this query. And if I want, I can hit download, and it will download all of this into a CSV that I can then share with other folks or analyze further. Now, just for grins, let's run this query again, because we felt the time it took to run that, right? It took a minute to run. Run it again. Now, since the result set's cached, it came back significantly faster. And again, we can figure out, well, let's see if we can figure out why. Let's go to queries. But instead of me selecting that one query and drilling down on it, I'm going to select those two queries, and I'm going to use compare. So this is going to show me the two queries side by side. So this started 19 seconds ago, took 132 milliseconds to run. The first one, this is the one that we ran earlier. This one was started 2 minutes ago, but it took 8 seconds. So this is clearly an improvement. Now, the other things we can look at are things like the query configuration. This is going to be a lot more interesting when we've played with some of the configuration parameters and ran these queries several times over time. We can then hide the equal values and focus on just the differences and see what's going on that made that query run more effectively. Now, in this case, we know it's simply the cached result set. But in other cases, we may adjust the query configuration. We may adjust the system configuration. And here we can dial in on what's going to optimize our workloads very effectively. So the last thing I just wanted to show, just kind of hint at, is, so here we've seen what we've been able to do with the new Hue, some of the things that we can do with the new stored procedures, some things we can do with the new file importer, some things that we can do with evaluating our queries and looking at the different queries and comparing them. But what if we're now ready to take our data to the next level and share it with the business? So I'm just going to give a quick hint as to what's possible with data visualization. So I also have single sign-on to data visualization. I'm going to jump into data viz. And here we're also connected to the virtual warehouses. I'm not going to go into how to set this up and use it. I'm just going to open up any one of these existing dashboards and give you a hint. So now we can take the data that we've sliced and diced, the queries and the result sets that we've built that we love from Hue, and we can plug them into very different types of rich visuals that give us the ability to share the information as a decision-making point to our audience and communities. All right. So other things that we can do with you that I didn't share, we have the ability to share saving queries. We can save documents. We can share queries and share documents. So this is a way of collaborating across teams. A lot of what I showed you today is what an individual would do, but being able to share that documentation across teams is cool. And all the result sets that you saw when we ran those queries, we can also export those result sets as CSV or PDF. And we can take the query and use that query in Cloudera Data Visualization to help make new data sets. So where are we going next? Well, the next steps we're taking, and these we're looking at the next couple of quarters, we're looking to continue the mission of feature complete. We're going to continue our mission of integrating into the platform. And we're going to continue to look for other cool innovations that will help us have even greater usability and greater experience with our data. So for feature complete, we're looking at a load balancing update. So right now with Hue, because Hue is bound to a given virtual warehouse, the virtual warehouse provides a kind of auto scaling. As we scale the virtual warehouse behind, the Hue that's attached to it will be able to take advantage of that and be able to keep up with higher numbers of users or higher demands on data sizes. We're also going to, but with this, what we're going to do is be able to allow Hue to have its own independent load balancing so that we can have even greater numbers of users on Hue independent of the servers that'll be running for the virtual warehouse behind. The other thing we're going to be doing is upgrading to Python 3 support, and that's slowly rolling out in the various versions of Hue, starting with the next release. For CDP integration, we're going to take Hue, and this is why we're talking about load balancing. We're going to take Hue and we're going to make it standalone. What this means is from one Hue experience, all of your queries, not just for Hive, not just separately for HPL SQL, as you saw today, and separately for Impala, and separately for Spark, and separately for you name the SQL you're using, have a single Hue that you choose which editor you're working on, just like you see in the open source Hue, but do this as a standalone Kubernetes service in the public cloud along with CDP, or in your on-premises OpenShift or containerized on-premises environment as a service. This will allow you to be able to have a single Hue that you communicate and collaborate with everyone with, but because it's going to be standalone, it's going to have a lot more need to be able to do its own load balancing independent of the service it's connected to. We're going to continue our RAS improvements and continue to get even greater, finer degree of control over the security. And we're going to tighten up the Cloudera data visualization handoff back and forth between those two tools so that folks who wear both hats have a streamlined experience, as well as communities that are sharing the work of discovering the queries and using the queries have an easier way to communicate. We're also going to bring that Excel import out of Tech Preview and bring that to everyone. And that file import that I showed, if you need to do a file that's larger than the small file import, we have the ability when the S3 browser is connected to be able to upload a large file into S3. And then we use the S3 as a staging area to do the import of large CSVs. So we'll still continue to support that. But what we'll be doing is increasing the file size that you can import directly without needing to configure Hue for S3 or ADLS or any other storage browsing, and without the need of having that staging area there, which adds additional time and cost to the entire equation. So the larger files that we can bring in directly, like I showed today, the better we'll be at being able to use that data more quickly for exploratory purposes. So that's everything I had for the demo. Let's see if we have any questions.
All right, David. Yeah, we have a good list of questions. I'm just going to run down each of them. So the first question is from Sai Suj. She's asking this question from LinkedIn. What is the maximum column row limit that can be handled by Hue?
So Hue actually doesn't have a maximum column or row limit per se. Now, that being said, when you do a query to get data back, because Hue is a lightweight service and is not designed to examine all of your data, we highly recommend you do things like putting a limit. And typically there's a throttle built into the configuration of Hue to limit at about 100,000 rows. The number of columns don't matter. They're typically limited by the number of columns that can be returned by the data server that you're looking at. The more you bring back, the more challenging it's going to be on Hue and the longer it may take to render or show in the browser that you're using. So the way I would look at that is explore a little bit. If you're looking at tens of hundreds of rows, tens of hundreds of columns, tens of thousands of rows, this may be pushing Hue's lightweight service to its limit. And that might be a place where you'd look at Cloudera data visualization to explore data in that greater depth. Because the purpose of Hue is designing and building the query, not necessarily examining the data sets in detail.
Makes sense. All right. The next question is from Suman. Do you need, from LinkedIn again, do you need to schedule to refresh the data?
I think yes. So let me explain. So in Hue, when we run the query, the result set comes back. And that's it. The result set is then presented and it's put into the browser, and that query's execution is complete. We do not poll to see if that data set that's visible in Hue needs to change. You would have to rerun the query and get a new data set back. Because again, Hue's purpose is for you to explore the creation of the query and develop the SQL and develop the procedures that go with the data structures, etc. However, if you are using Cloudera data visualization, then no, you do not need to refresh the data. It does automatically refresh with changes in the data in the back end. And it's configurable how that's done. So if you're looking at and worried about certain drains on certain system resources, you can configure that. But the purpose of Cloudera data visualization is to give you that real-time or near real-time understanding of the current state of the data right now as you're examining the dashboard, and it will refresh very quickly as changes to the data are made behind.
Awesome. This next question is from Kanishka from LinkedIn again. Is it possible to load multiple files at the same time?
At present, no. The file importer looks at one file at a time. And when we look at something like the Excel import, it looks at one sheet at a time. The way we handle it is we need a single, basically, representation of a table where the columns can distinctly identify the columns that would map to a table. And then below the columns, all the rows would be data that'll insert into those columns. So effectively, if you think about what's happening behind, we do a create table that creates a table based on the table name and the column names and data types you defined in the first phase of the import. And then we do a bunch of insert intos to load that data from each row into the table we've just created. So after that's complete, you can then run another import from small file on a second file and on a third one, and so on. Now, that being said, there are things that you can do with the Cloudera Data Platform. If you regularly have multiple small files or multiple CSVs that you want to import on a regular basis into the data warehouse, there's something that maybe Minify or one of the other data ingest tools that we have in the Cloudera Data Platform may be a better solution for you than Hue. So Hue would be great if you have even up to like 10 or 15. You got to spend a little bit of time getting them in there, but you put all your data in there to explore. But if you're going to need to do that repeatedly on those same types of files over and over, that's a job for an automation on an ingest that we also include in the Cloudera Data
Platform. Got it. This next question is from MCCat from YouTube. Can I define variables in HQL body, like in PL SQL?
Yes, you can. So there is a full syntax, and actually I can show on my screen. Let me just show quickly if I can put my screen back on. In the Cloudera documentation, you'll see we have the CDW stored procedures, and we have a number of examples where you can see how the stored procedures can be built. Here's a declaration of a variable. But also in the open source community, there's an entire HPL SQL reference pointed to by the Cloudera documentation that tells you everything you can do with this stored procedure syntax and language.
Okay. This next question is from Marty from LinkedIn. Is Phoenix access through the Hue Web UI available yet? He says, I think I saw a recent announcement on that.
Yeah, so we are working on Phoenix support. Phoenix support is in Hue, and it's going to be available in our, what do we call it? The Cloudera operational database. Be part of our Cloudera operational database experience in the near future. And then as we move Hue out of this co-joined existence with each experience into a single Hue for all of CDP, it'll then become one of the drop downs that you would select to say which editor and which dialect you're going to be using. And then you can make a connection to an appropriate environment that's running the Phoenix or the HBase or the whatever it is that you would be connecting to from the CDP.
Yeah, thanks, David. I see a lot more questions coming in, and I do encourage everyone to, I'm just reminding you all to keep entering questions, comments on your chat, through your chat, and we are constantly monitoring and answering your questions here to participate in the raffle. So yeah, this next question is from Kaushik. How does visual explain work when comparing queries? Does it show the second query actually fetched cached results?
So that's a good question. Let me see. Am I still sharing my display? All right. So if I come back to Hue here and look at the visual explain, you do see the side by side in the compare. But what's interesting is this is the one that ran the full query against the whole job. This is the one that ran as a cached result, and the only action was taken is a fetch. So just from the visual explain, you can immediately see the difference between the query that was run for the first time where everything had to be brought in, and then when the query was run the second time where we just literally fetched the result from the cache.
Okay. This next question is from Augusto from YouTube. Can we edit table metadata and tags, and this will be saved on Atlas?
So the answer to that is yes, of course, through Atlas. You can certainly use Atlas to do all of the metadata tagging that you want. The way we've integrated Atlas with Hue today is when you do something like a search, if you're searching for data or saved documents, when you use the search in Hue, it's going to look at the Atlas tags as part of the search and present to you results that would come from anything that shares a common tag or shares a common descriptor. We do not yet have the way to go back from Hue to Atlas to make the modifications to those tags. So that's an interesting conversation to have, because as we're declaring new table structures and columns and things like that, as we're manipulating with DDL and DML, being able to also include those tags in that work would make a lot of sense, but it's not currently in scope and it's not currently supported today. So the inverse is supported. Anything you do in Atlas is visible to Hue, but things you do in Hue do not directly influence that. In Atlas, you'd have to go into the Atlas experience to be able to make those changes.
Okay. Okay, this next question is from Marty from LinkedIn. Export to Cloudera data visualization is great. Is it GA yet? And with what Cloudera release?
So that is GA, and it's available in the Cloudera release. I don't remember exactly when that went GA. Actually, let me rephrase that. The ability to have the Cloudera data visualization as part of your virtual warehouse, that's been GA for some time. The ability to take a query and use it as a data set in Cloudera data visualization. Right now, today in the GA version, you would actually basically cut from Hue and paste as query into data visualization, but they're sharing the same connection. So you just have to cut and paste the query. The data set connection is already there. We're doing some work to separate data viz, very similar to the work we're doing to separate Hue from the virtual warehouse. And when that's done, we'll also have, and that's going to be tech preview later this quarter, have the ability to also communicate, here's a query I want to create a data set from Hue into Viz. So that's not GA yet, but everything up to the query itself showing up there, that's all fully integrated right now.
Awesome. Okay, so Saisujit has asked another question. Using job browser, can these jobs or queries be scheduled without manual run like it's showing like DAG? I'm not sure I got this, but do you want me to repeat it, David?
No. So
Okay.
right now I'm just running queries, and then we're looking at the results and the jobs that were spawned from those queries and the query executions that were run from those queries, because I'm just basically doing some SQL work. But the job browser's purpose is to view the jobs as they're running and the jobs as they're scheduled. Actually scheduling the jobs is the task of other tooling at this time.
Oh, okay. And then there's another question from Augusto. Can we retrieve query plan from a query that was previously ran from history?
Yes. So if we look at, again, if I can share my display for a moment. If we look at queries, you can see here I'm showing all of the queries, and you can show them run up to, up to the last year. Anything that is still remembered by this virtual warehouse. Here are all of the queries, and I can go to any query that was run in the past. This is a new environment for me, so there aren't that many. And I can take a look at the visual explain for them. I can also go and select it, could be months ago, and a query run today, and use them as the basis for a compare.
Okay. This next question is from Santiago. What components does Hue use for load balancing?
So I don't have a technical answer for that at the moment, but that's something we could probably get back to you on if you need to know that information, certainly feel free to reach out to your Cloudera contacts, and we'd be more than happy to get that information to you.
Okay. This next question is from Manish. When you upgrade CDH, what happens to custom applications? Is it backward compatible?
So that's a broader question about CDH migration to CDP. And I don't have an off the top of my head answer to that specifically. I know there's always a good, it depends around those kinds of things. So that would be another one that I think would be a great conversation for you to have with a Cloudera contact and see what's right for you, given the work that you already have in your custom applications when doing the migration from HTTP to CDP.
Okay. So Suman had asked a question earlier, which we answered. Do you need to schedule to refresh the data? And you answered that, David. This is a follow-up question from that. If my query takes longer time to run, what is the recommendation for the visualization?
So let's see if I understand the question. So I'm assuming that we're probably talking about Cloudera data visualization at this point. If we're talking about Hue, then the answer is, well, Hue isn't really meant to be sharing the information that way. So the answer would be certainly use Cloudera data visualization as your answer for visualizing. Now, if the query takes a long time to run, there's a couple of different things that we can look at there. We can look at ways to improve that query's execution time. That might be things like maybe applying more resources, so scaling up the virtual warehouse behind. It might be optimizing the query itself, or maybe using things like materialized views, which are available now in Cloudera Data Warehouse, to pre-build certain joins and reduce the complexity of the actual query running. That may also speed up the time that it takes to produce the results that you're looking for. So there's a few things that we can do on the back end that may improve the query execution time. But if the query really does take a long time to run, then it doesn't really matter on the visualization side. You're still going to need to wait for that execution before the visual will catch up. So there we can do things on the visuals side again to maybe build certain aggregate visuals and have them drilled down into more detailed visuals that will give you that full data set that you'd need to pull back when you need to drill down further for greater granularity. So that's a technique that we use quite frequently with a lot of our customers, that the higher level dashboard is just taking an aggregate data set, perhaps from a materialized view. That returns quickly, and then when you know you need to drill down to look at details on a certain segment, you know you're going to be waiting several minutes or hours, depending on the length of time the query can run, to get to those details. But that's the price you pay for the complexity in data sets you're working on.
Right. Okay, this next question is from Saba. Does Hue support importing tables from RDBMS, and how Hue is integrated to access S3 buckets in CDP public?
So there's two questions there.
Mm-hmm.
Hue itself doesn't integrate with other tables and other databases per se. What you would do is you could use Hue and its SQL editor to run the commands necessary to do things like set up an external table in Hive or in Impala or something like that to make that external table connection work. Given that, you would then be able to query those tables as if they were tables native in the virtual warehouse you're connected to. The second part of the question, can you repeat it again, Navita? I don't remember the exact phrase.
Yeah, the second part is Hue is integrated to access S3 buckets in CDP public cloud. How is Hue integrated?
Sure, yes. So what you can do with Hue is, and I don't have that configuration, so I can't show it to you right now, but what it is you would define the S3 bucket that would be connected to Hue, and then Hue can browse that bucket through a file browser that looks an awful lot like a file explorer or a Finder in Mac, that allows you to navigate through all of the different folders and see all of the different files that you have access to. When you're using the ID broker security, then you would need to be given access to the bucket at the bucket level, the way Amazon sets that up, and then anything in there you can see. If you're using RAS integration, we can provide a greater degree of fine-grained access control on the S3 bucket. So a shared S3 bucket can be shared to a broader community where different users have different access to different folders and files within the S3 bucket. And all of that's fully supported today out of box.
Right. This next question is from Manish. Are there any licensing related to Hue, or is it integrated by default with Cloudera?
Hue is included by default in the Cloudera Data Platform. Hue is also an open source project and is licensed by the standard licensing that we offer with the Cloudera Data Platform. But separate from licensing, this is not charged or sold separately when you are a subscriber or you're consuming the Cloudera Data Platform in public or private cloud. Hue is part of the Cloudera Data Platform and the Cloudera Data Warehouse. It's included in your price.
Right. So Suman is just saying, thank you, David, very well explained. With this, I am coming to my last question. So I just want to remind the viewers again that if they have any more questions, please enter your questions before we close the Q&A section. So this last question is from Oleg. He's saying, is there any plan to support Apache Airflow in Hue instead of Uzi?
So yes, we do have a longer term plan to explore what we're doing with Airflow and Uzi. I don't have any fixed dates at this time, but it's definitely on the roadmap.
Cool. So yeah, with that, we've come to an end of our Q&A section. Yeah, let's go to the resources page. I just want to remind our viewers of these resources that are available for them. You can go to the Cloudera users page where there are a bunch of videos, tutorials, events, and more where you can learn. And then the next link is the Discover Cloudera Data Platform link, which will take you to the CDP page that has an overview of CDP, some more videos to learn more about CDP, and you can also take a free trial. And then the third link is Future of Data Meetup. Yeah, this page will take you to our Future of Data Meetup page where you can see all the upcoming meetups and sign up for the next meetup. I also want to let you all know that some participants may be receiving a survey. We want to gather feedback from you on how we are doing and maybe some more suggestions of how we can improve. So yeah, if you receive a survey, please complete, or we'd love your participation. With that, let's go to the more exciting part of the event. I want to do the prize drawing, and we have this cool wheel of fortune here, kind of a thing here where we that we'll use to do the drawing for the prizes. I've entered the names of all those who asked questions or had any comments and who participated during the meetup. So yeah, let's click on the Wheel of Fortune to see who's won our first prize. Congratulations, Manish Matok. You've won the first prize. And I'm going to spin the wheel again to see who's our second prize winner. Congratulations, Gabriel. You are our second winner. Well, congratulations to all the prize winners. You will have to write an email to socialmedia@cloudera.com to claim your prizes, and the prizes will be emailed to you. On behalf of the Cloudera team, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us and making this event a great success. Thanks for asking questions. I also want to thank our social media team, Bill Brooks and George, who've helped us make this meetup a success. Thank you so much. We look forward to seeing you at our next Future of Data meetup. Thanks again for joining. Bye-bye.